good afternoon. Whenever you're listening to this, welcome to the internet's most sophisticated wrestling podcast, discussing the weekly aspects of it all, right here on
The Bald Monkeys Wrestling Podcast.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bald Monkeys Wrestling Podcast. And today is a little bit of a somber day, a somber occasion, because Goldberg has retired the Fiend. Thus, basically, for me personally, killing that storyline.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to see the death of the best story WWE main roster had going for him.
For nothing.
For what? For what?
For Saudi Arabia.
No, to set up something for WrestleMania, but still, it shouldn't have happened.
Well, quite frankly, I'm kind of over main card WWE. I've been saying that for a long time, but this might as well be like the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know everybody. You guys were reacting like I knew something had happened before I even knew anything, because my phone started going absolutely crazy at one point. Like, it buzzed like 15 times. And I was like, oh, well, it's about time that the Fiend and Goldberg were fighting. So I figured before I even looked at it that Goldberg had won. And, all I did was just laugh. I just think it's funny. It's funny. It's really funny. Quite frankly.
I do apologize for that. I even put up on Twitter, I said, I dropped a couple of F-bombs in our podcast text chat, and I do apologize for that. I am deeply sorry.
I apologize for nothing. Everything I said was worth it, and I am livid at how they did the Fiend wrong. And it's not just today, right? It's overall. The Fiend was done wrong over the last, 4 months. The minute they put the belt on him, they destined him for this death, because eventually someone had to beat him. Someone, whoever that was going to be us being upset about it, because we weren't going to be happy with anybody except if they would have had Bray Wyatt lose rather than the Fiend lose. And then the moment today I thought that maybe we could salvage this was, all right, well, the Fiend lost, but maybe there'll be some twist where it's not the belt, or, he never really defended the belt. Nope. The belt magically turned into the blue belt after he walked out with the face belt. So they've just killed the entire character, the entire storyline, and the entire main card push that Bray Wyatt built. How long was it? Months, years to rebuild himself, to be squashed by Goldberg in a suplex? Awful.
Chance wanted to be on the podcast. I apologize.
He's pissed off too, and I don't blame him.
He's very angry. But I'm not. I'm not angry. I mean, they've been misguiding this storyline for so long that why should I care? Why should I care that they decided to pull the plug and screw it up? And some people, it was almost funny because, there's all those people trying to instigate little fights on Twitter and stuff. And so one of, the people on Twitter was like, all you people who are just bashing this moment, you're going to tune in on to SmackDown on Friday. Fact. Not fact. Not watching SmackDown tomorrow. I don't care. I'll take a break from main card WWE. It's not interesting anymore. How many times is it worth my time as a wrestling podcaster to sit here and complain about the same things over and over and over again? Doesn't make any sense.
It just proves that Saudi Arabia is 100% about the money, because there's no reason for Goldberg to even be in this match other than them knowing that Saudi Arabia wants the big name old school wrestlers. Undertaker shows up, Goldberg shows up. Have they done a Saudi show without one of these old name guys there? And they want to put them over on these shows. Hogan was there last time, right?
Yeah, but that's whatever. Okay, fine. If it's a money grab, let them go to the show, let them do their shit, but don't fuck shit up that has literally been going that could have been going a lot better than what all of a sudden they started doing with the Fiend and the character and the whole thing there. I mean, the fact that Goldberg, a part-timer, not even a part-timer, he is less than a part-timer. Whatever is less than a part-timer is what fucking Goldberg is. I mean, gee, I Brock Lesnar is more of a full timer than some of the guys that we have on any of the rosters. But Goldberg, go at it to do what? To do what? What is the end game? To have some bullshit WrestleMania match that no one's gonna give two fucks about. I'm
And
sorry.
odds
I'm
are
sorry.
it's gonna be the main event of the night. Odds are.
It's terrible. It is absolutely terrible. WWE, terrible. Your writers, terrible. Your creative, terrible. You guys suck. I take dumps that have more charisma than you do.
That's the epitome of a hot take right there. It's a hot steamy pile. But I I want to go to Steven's point. So, do you really think Goldberg Roman Reigns is a bigger main event than Brock Lesnar Drew McIntyre?
Probably not. Not in our
No.
book, but
No. Yeah, no.
in some people's book it would be.
Would they really do that? Like, that scares me.
Are you really asking that question? Like, do you mean that? Would they really do that? It's Roman freaking Reigns. He's main evented WrestleMania probably 9 times in the last 6 years. I mean, that's a little bit of sarcasm, but he's always in the freaking main event. He's in the night so many times, and the only one that was any good is when Seth Rollins came out and cashed in.
And it's Brock Lesnar. He doesn't like to wait the whole time. He'll have his match first.
They should really do like a legends versus like rookies match and just have the rookies bury every single legend so that we don't have to see them anymore. I mean, I love the Undertaker. I love his whole thing, but dude, it's time to it's time to hang him up. No more.
Dude, you got to that point, Ricochet got buried today by Lesnar. Ricochet got zero offense today. Zero. His promo package was longer than what he lasted in the match.
You know what was
And the
interesting?
promo
They
package
did the
was
same thing
maybe
to Kofi
why
did.
not?
Well,
Why
no,
not?
no, they
Why
did what
not?
they did what they should have done to Kofi to Ricochet, though. I will say that, like with Kofi, they did one move and he beats Kofi. Like what they should have done with Kofi was they should have had him take multiple
Bunch of
suplexes,
suplexes,
then take the
yeah.
F5, and it doesn't last very long, but it's still they gave Ricochet better treatment than Kofi, but it's like, is there really anybody out there that hasn't picked up on the fact that WWE wants you to believe that Brock Lesnar is like really, really tough? Have we overlooked the fact too that maybe they find some way to push Drew McIntyre out of the title picture and have Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar for 2 belts?
I quit at that point. I quit. Like, if when are they going to realize that that's not what any of us want?
That's not what any of
Well,
us want.
Dude, if that's the thing, is anybody watching these matches with Goldberg? Was anybody tuning in for Goldberg Fiend because of Goldberg, or were they tuning in because of Fiend? Did anybody watch the Goldberg Lesnar match, that WrestleMania, because they wanted to see Goldberg Lesnar? No. Like, they have to see that the ratings are gonna go down with these names. You have great wrestlers on your roster. Start pushing them before they're not on your roster anymore. Case in point, look at the guys on AEW flourishing right now because they got a shot.
In AEW, we give it a hard time from time to time because we don't want them to, get into a system where they start making the same mistakes that WWE makes. But, apart from most of the time, what just ends up being production issues, drink, it's solid, I mean, even the worst episode of AEW that I've seen has been like an average wrestling show. Like, oh, this is fine.
I think we all said it this week. Steven said it. AEW was the show of the week.
The first match from AEW this week, that Iron Man match with Pac and Omega, that alone beat everything I've seen from WWE this week. No offense to NXT, but that match alone was worth not giving a damn about any of it.
Yeah, it was a classic, Omega match, a classic Pac match, and then even at the end, Pac loses and we get a great promo, and then now we're gonna finally see Orange Cassidy and Pac go at it at Revolution, which is I think should be super entertaining, one way or another. Either he's gonna surprise us or he's just gonna take a beating, and the guy can take a beating, but he can go when he has to go. The only thing that I'm going to negatively talk about AEW was unfortunately the women's match was clunky as usual, but the rest of the show was excellent. The Moxley Jericho weigh-in to build up the title match was hilarious and well done.
Yeah,
Even
when
the
I
aftermath of that, like the Jericho's had to get like 7 or 8 stitches. Like they're really playing it up the right way.
when I first saw that, I was like, "Are we doing like a boxing weigh-in?" And then it happened, and I was like, "You want to know what? I take it back. That was actually really, really good."
Them doing the cha-cha line to the ring was hilarious. Their
Great.
matching suits were hilarious. Jericho just rousing up the KC fans, which personally I loved. So I mean, it was a great spot to build up a title match that's had great build up already. And then
Yeah,
obviously, the only thing I'll ever say about AEW lately is I feel like their run-ins are mistimed a little bit. Do you guys notice that where they have people run in, but it always seems like Dustin ran in and his music hit and it seemed kind of like late by the time he finally ran in, and Darby Allin finally ran in and took a hell of a knee. Ooh, that knee was great. But their run-ins are weird. There's a timing issue there with their run-ins. They have to work on that. But other than that, overall, like a great promo to pitch another heavyweight match.
yeah. When the Inner Circle came out, I saw somebody put up on Twitter, "Oh, look, the Inner Circle's ready to take on Average Joe's Gym and Globo Gym."
Hmm.
But somebody on Twitter put where the state of WWE now is perfect in two very short sentences. The WWE has become complacent and are content with just making money and don't care about quality. They take zero pride in what they do, and I think it's a true statement.
Except for NXT.
Yeah, I mean, but even so,
They're
I don't
not
think
even
NXT was
WWE.
that. Yeah, NXT I don't think hasn't been as good since probably right around Rumble time, a little bit before, but it's still been a hell of a lot better than Raw and SmackDown.
I'm going to make a hot take right here. I am not interested in another Johnny Gargano Tommaso Ciampa feud. I I'm
I
just
I'm done with all those feuds, man.
didn't it just seem like, I mean, I don't know if you guys watched NXT yet or went back and watched it or were able to watch it live, but it just seemed flat. Like it's like I was interested in the Ciampa Austin Theory match. It was a good match, really good match. But the whole setup after the fact with Gargano, I was just like, we're doing this again?
Yeah, I
Like,
got the whole, like I said earlier, Corbin versus Roman feel. Like We've done this again. It was just like years ago when it was Randy Orton versus John Cena, or back in the Attitude Era with Triple H versus The Rock. Like they found that one that consistently delivers, and they just milk it and milk it and milk it. And then with Ciampa getting hurt before, they didn't get that payoff they wanted to end it, and now they're bringing it back up again, and it's not needed. And I just the whole time I was watching it, I kept feeling like I've seen this already recently.
That was the turn of the show for me this week too. Grimes and Dijakovic was okay. It was not great, but it was okay. Imperium came out and attacked Balor, which I thought was interesting. Lee and Yim, another interesting thing because you got Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez came out. The Ciampa over Theory match was good, and then that's when the turn came. As soon as Gargano came out, here's the turn. Dane versus Reed was not good. The Grizzled Young Vets and Forgotten Sons it was botchy. They are both good tag teams, and I love tag teams, but it just didn't mesh well for what the story was trying to build. And then Charlotte Belair, I mean, it was one of Belair's better singles matches, but I think that's because Charlotte Flair was in it, not because Bianca Belair did anything special. So the back half of NXT allowed me to watch more AEW, which I enjoyed thoroughly.
Yeah, I didn't care for the Flair, the women's match at all. I didn't care for it. It was typical Flair that we've seen every feud she's been in, and when she's a heel, and it was nothing new other than it was an NXT.
I don't know that WrestleMania even looks exciting this year at all.
I want to see Drew McIntyre, Claymore, Brock again, because if it's anything remotely like it was at the Rumble, that'll be worth me watching it.
But again, it's the question of that makes Chris Dunn, right? Is that really what the game plan is, or is the game plan to have them have their WrestleMania match and eventually set up Goldberg versus Brock for both belts?
I don't see them doing that at this point. Like, it makes no sense to do that, to put them back together when they've worked so hard on separating them.
Didn't you just? I know, but didn't you just say the thing about Gargano Ciampa? They're just cashing in on it again. Why wouldn't they cash in on Brock?
On the belts? Why would they put the belts together? That doesn't make sense to me.
Because they don't care about them. What do they care about in WWE? They care about making money.
It's just it's awful. I hope you're wrong, Jimmy. Like I really do. And I hate the tone of this podcast. we are so somber after this show today. And it's interesting because all the show had to do was perform like a house show, have all the champions retain, and we would have been fine. Even you know what? The New Day losing, I get that. That's perfectly okay. If that's the title you want to change hands at a house show, cool. I'm all right with that. But the fact that we had to watch Ricochet just get demolished, we had to watch The Fiend get killed, we had to watch Undertaker come out and do his slow walkout, to the point where even Undertaker won that trophy, which means nothing, but he even had to win. You couldn't even let AJ Styles win the trophy, start, bantering about how great he is, and then let the Undertaker come out and beat him up. No, you had to actually give it to the Taker also. It's like, how many older guys do we have? You know what? Miz and Morrison, older guys too. Was there anybody under the age of 35 who won a title today or retained a title today?
Bailey.
Like Bailey.
Bailey. And that's only because there isn't older women in the division.
Natalia.
Well, she doesn't have a title. She's never going to win a title. I don't know, man.
Win them women tag titles at Mania.
The women's division has tag titles? I've never seen them before. So let's touch on one half of the women's tag champions. Probably the one good thing from WWE this week was, surprisingly, that contract signing was fairly entertaining, I thought. Asuka playing her drunk Asuka role was amazing, as usual. Liv Morgan doing a complete Superman dive over the table to tackle Ruby Riott was actually pretty good. I didn't necessarily love the back and forth between Shayna Baszler and Becky Lynch, but that's what you got to do, right? Jimmy's always talking about that. That's the trademark. We're gonna get two people being held apart right before a big main event, right? So
And then they
those two
break
are obviously
free
building for
and they
WrestleMania.
attack each other and yada yada yada. Yeah.
But how good is Asuka, and how much are they wasting her?
So
No,
much.
I don't think any of us would disagree with that.
Let's talk about something happy, man. Let's talk
I like
about
Happy.
let's talk like so let's totally just change this up. Who wants to go first? I got a couple questions for you. Who wants to go first? Somebody.
No context whatsoever.
No context whatsoever. I'm just going to start asking you questions.
Just pick somebody.
Steven, when is the first time you ever watched wrestling?
Oh God, I was probably 7 or 8. It's one of the few things I remember ever doing with my biological dad before he left. So way to make this not.
Do you remember what it was that pulled you to wrestling in particular?
If I'm remembering correctly, it was Mick Foley. Just I thought he was great.
What made him great?
Just he wasn't the typical person out there. It was along the time of him and The Rock and all their back and forth, and it was great. The corporation was becoming a big deal, and Mankind was that underdog nobody gave credit to, and he was just wonderful. He was unpredictable. He was crazy. You never knew what he was going to do. I loved it.
What about you, Chris?
Saturday morning superstars, hanging out at my dad's. When I was a little kid, I was probably, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years old or something, and spending time at my dad's house, and he was too busy working, so I got time to sit at home and watch TV and play Super Nintendo and watch Saturday morning superstars. So yeah, that's definitely watching the old school Vince McMahon and Jesse the Body Ventura, talking about wrestling in the morning and eating my cereal. This is the best, man.
What cereal? What cereal was it?
It was probably Cookie Crisp, but I don't remember.
yeah.
I mean, that's a shot in the dark because I don't remember what Cookie Crisp came out, but I know that was one of my favorites when I was a kid.
Chuckles, when did you start watching wrestling?
Oh man, back in the mid '80s, I remember my dad and I going to Madison Square Garden for like a Saturday house show. And I remember seeing like the Junkyard Dog
Oh
and
man.
the Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan. We were probably about, oh man, like the 100 section in the garden, like the first section up from where the floor was. So no one who was on the floor like hindered being able to see. But man, I remember that like so vividly, going with him, and always watching in the mornings with my dad. Especially like just like what Chris said, like on Saturday mornings and stuff. And man, we would watch WCW at night on like Saturdays when it was on TBS before like all the crazy Monday Night Wars and stuff. I mean, it was just awesome. Like it was the personalities of the characters that were these wrestlers is what like got me into them. And oh man, I can't even, like, how can I forget Ricky the Dragon Steamboat? I mean, one of my favorite wrestlers growing up as a kid.
Yes.
I mean, that guy was, he was amazing. And it just everything about it, and it it always goes through cycles. I feel it has its ups, it has its downs, but man, those early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, man, I don't know. It just holds like a place in your heart, just good times.
Yeah, I always wish, looking back on wrestling, I really wish I could have experienced, and it would have been impossible because there's going to be a trend here. The two things I remember loving when I was a little kid were horror movies and wrestling. And they had two things. They had thing in particular in common was that my mother did not want me watching them.
Oh yes.
and
Oh
it's
yes.
and it's because when I came up in watching wrestling, it was in the beginning of the Attitude Era, so it was bad. I mean, The Rock was saying stuff that was just I I think it was interesting because she didn't want me watching it, and I don't even think she actually listened to it, or else I would have been totally banned. But I used to sneak it all the time. And I'm right with you, Steven. I remember Mick Foley specifically as Mankind and loving that character so much. I mean, in a time when you had all of these characters that people would put up on their, their Mount Rushmore, your Rocks and your Stone Colds and your Triple H's. Like, for me, it was Mankind. Like, Mankind was awesome because he was, like you said, he was so different. He was so cool. And I remember when the Hardy Boys came around and how much I liked the Hardy Boys, because the Hardy Boys, they were crazy. They were different.
Yeah, back when they were part of the Brood and all the original Edge and Christian feud and the first ladder match they had for the bag of money. I remember watching that myself.
Yeah, I also remember the Dudley Boys, and and it was weird because I actually had kind of a love-hate relationship with the Dudley Boys because I was always a Hardy Boys person, but I respected the Dudley Boys, and they always put on these really good, tables matches and stuff like that. I mean, God, it's interesting, I think, when you look at all four of us and the fact that we still watch wrestling. I mean, what keeps you into wrestling, boys? What keeps it going?
This podcast.
But I don't. But that's not. I
No.
don't think that that's the case at all. Of course,
No.
because the podcast would have never started had we not just continued to
Honestly,
watch.
yeah, a lot of it is it's the connection of that thought of what you just asked. The first time watching wrestling, the old school wrestling, and you guys rattled off a bunch of wrestlers, and what I've started to harp on when you guys were saying were great tag teams. Great tag teams that we used to see back in the day that you don't get right now. And I think every time I think about when I see wrestling that's really good, and a lot of it that's been really good has been some of this tag team stuff or some of these quicker, faster guys. It does remind me of when I first started watching wrestling and started watching like the Rockers come up, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Those guys that just changed the way wrestling was starting to be looked at. I mean, you can go back as far as the Rock and Roll Express when they were younger too, but just when I started growing up, I just I couldn't get over how amazing some of these smaller guys were, and they still had the bigger guys in there too. I mean, Vince still loved the bigger guys then, but that's what I keep harping on, man. It reminds me of being a kid. It when I geek out when the Hurricane comes out at the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia, it's because I'm still a kid and I love seeing that stuff and I want to feel like a kid again.
Seeing for me, I mean, I continue to watch just because I like to see what else these guys can come up with. I mean, you know, early wrestling was more technical, I guess you could say, and in a way cheesy. You have the leg drop, you have the headlock, the sleeper hold, all these things that at the time you were like, oh man, that leg drop looks awesome. That Hulk Hogan just did, man, that's great. But nowadays it's like, okay, yeah, let's see someone do like a 630 off the top rope, onto somebody who's on a table and this and that and the other thing. I mean, the other thing is, and I think Chris and would agree with, is seeing your kids kind of get into it too, because now you're in the reverse role of how we just described with how I described it with my dad. Like, I was able to bring Landry to her first wrestling show, and we've been to 2 so far, and she loves it. She loves the interaction that she can have with the superstars as they come in and out, especially the last time we went. And it's just fun to see her get excited about seeing her favorite wrestler come out, or somebody that she really cheers for.
There's 2 wrestlers, because you guys talk about we are talking about all this old school wrestling, and there's something that kind of bridges this idea that where you're talking about cheesy wrestling, and Steven had mentioned like a group like the Brood, which is just unbelievable. If you're being realistic, it's unbelievable. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that shows like AEW and especially NWA Power's got going for it, is that, of course, this is ridiculous. You got this guy named the Question Mark who does karate. Like, it's a ridiculous character, but the crowd loves it. They eat it up. And yes, sometimes you do really dumb characters. I've got a piece in me that loves nostalgia for really bad characters, which is why I'm always like, they need to bring the Gobbledygooker back at a Rumble. It would be the greatest thing ever to have the Gobbledygooker come out at the Rumble. I'm telling you, it would be a great flippin' moment. Because everybody thought it was the dumbest thing ever when it happened, but it's that silly thing that the WWE is missing nowadays. Like when they went so into, hey, we're going to make it a sport and we're going to make it serious. Look at AEW. You got a giant guy that's dressed like a dinosaur, luchador, and people love him for it. I mean, it's not realistic, but people love it.
But again, and I know we've touched on this very briefly in our talks on this podcast. However, do we think a lot of what has happened in WWE is because of the change in societal times and how people are very, let's use a PC word, soft nowadays?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I don't think so, because what I'm talking about is some of these characters really aren't that bad. The characters that I mean, okay, I mean, there's some of them definitely from back in the day that may be a little bit too risky now. But what I'm talking about is the simple stuff, like having these kind of goofy characters and letting those characters flourish that way if it's working for them. Not taking wrestling way too seriously. I mean, it goes back to that promo that Joey Ryan had on Impact last year. That was like really like the vignette of the year, the Wrestler's Court. Like, yeah, he's a wrestler who pretends like he's got the most powerful penis in the world and that's what wins him matches. And that's ridiculous, but it's hysterical.
It's not pretend. It is
the
most powerful penis in the world.
But Joey Ryan's the perfect example. It's like wrestling is here specifically to be goofy. And instead of worrying about people getting upset about it, just do the crazy thing. And when they get upset about it, be like, it's fake. What are you talking about? What are you getting all upset about? It's fake.
Wait. Wrestling's fake? Shit.
I mean, it
better be fake after what we saw today.
it's I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what keeps me watching wrestling. It's what makes me really like NWA Power in particular. Is NWA Power it throws back big time. And it's weird how I'll watch NWA Power and I really buy into the promos that somebody like Nick Aldis cuts, where he talks about his belt and he talks like, this is the only belt in wrestling that matters. And I almost kind of buy into that because they still do wrestling the right way. And I just don't think WWE does wrestling the right way anymore.
I think they just got complacent. You know, there was really no one. There was no one to challenge them. There was no one on like national, like really national television anymore to kind of push them in any way. So they were like, okay, yep, we'll do whatever we want. You know, okay, yep. Oh, you guys don't like this? We're gonna do it anyway. You guys are still gonna come and spend your money, and we're still gonna take. We're still gonna bring in a ton of money, and it's gonna be fine, and we're not gonna care because there's really nothing you can do about it.
I wonder though, that comment that you made about, you know, taking Landry to shows, and, you know, Chris, you've taken Lily and Izzy to shows. Are they, when they're our age or older, going to still like wrestling? Or has wrestling done wrong by them in some way? Because they have lost the formula. They've lost the ability to keep people coming back because they haven't developed good enough stories and they haven't developed good enough characters.
There's a lot of kids at these events we go to.
I know, but how many of those kids turn into, you know, I guess is the wrestling fan, like true fan, the people that will go to every single show as they get older, is that on the decline or is that on the rise?
Decline. I mean, just look at the attendance. The attendance has been terrible for both shows, or for I should say all three shows. NXT always sells out, but AEW hasn't had great attendance. SmackDown or Raw, well, the only reason they had a sellout was because they went to the Northwest for the first time in like 15 years. Beyond that, everyone's doing 4,000 to 7,000 people in an arena. I mean, that's now nowhere near where they used to be in the Monday Night Wars days, where they were packing out houses with 15,000 plus every night. So if anything, it's people are able to watch on social media now. People are able to watch on, at home more. They don't need to go to events more. They're not going out to watch wrestling as much anymore. So to be honest, yes, they've lost whatever they had, but I don't know that it's because of anything they've done. I think it's just because society and computers and phones and technology is just passed wrestling by.
I don't know though, because I would bring up, I've got 4 examples here of 4 storylines that I think they mishandled in some form or fashion.
Just 4?
Well, I know there's a lot more than that, but here are like 4 big ones in my opinion. The most recent being today, you know, mishandling Bray Wyatt and The Fiend. Before that, it was Kofi, one of the most over angles ever, and then to just destroy it. You know, I mean, that's organically over. That gets people into wrestling. When something's organically over, it gets people interested in it. That's when, you know, I'm not saying you always have to perform fan service, but like at some point you need to give a little to the fans and understand that if the fans put something over, they're right. That's why, even though I don't get people like Becky Lynch, if everybody's cheering, I'll just sit back and not complain, you know, just complain to you guys about it. Before that, think of something like, you know, CM Punk, who had a good title run, but did he really get the respect that he deserved in that title run for how good he was on the mic and how good of a character he was? He wasn't even really he wasn't even really main eventing WrestleMania, which is crazy. And then before that, you get somebody who's getting over like Booker T, getting organically over before he just gets destroyed by Triple H. I mean, these are all examples of storylines of these people really being over and the fans really being behind them and being behind that, like, and just what do you get for it? You get nothing.
So before you go on, just a little bit of a rebuttal back to you. So who are the 4 people that were the ones that destroyed those 4 those 4 wrestlers / storylines that you just talked about?
So Goldberg destroyed Bray's storyline tonight, right? Brock Lesnar destroyed Kofi. It's kind of weird. I would say CM Punk is a mixture of Vince, Triple H, Kevin Nash, people like that. And then yeah, I mean Triple H.
So it's big guys and people who are on the right hand of Vince McMahon.
I mean, we all know. I mean, I feel like anybody who's been watching wrestling and has done any digging into WWE or watched any documentaries about WWE, or they understand Vince's infatuation with big guys, and he had the people that could basically commit murder like Shawn Michaels and stuff like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, while I understand that, it doesn't make up for the fact that you're choosing bad storyline over something that could work. I mean, there's a million other things we could throw in, like Rusev Day or something like that, because it's not a storyline that's brought, like, made by writers. Instead, I think it was that an Aiden English thing, right? Because of that, it's not going to get over. Think of Stu Bennett. What was Stu Bennett's name when he was in WWE? Why am I having a hard time thinking of it? Guy that led the Nexus. Why am I forgetting his name? Can't remember.
Wade Barrett.
Yeah, Wade Barrett. God, I've just watched too much NWA Power. I know him, Stu Bennett.
Yeah, that was tough. Yeah, too much power.
I mean, he himself, he created good storylines for himself. Got his own character over by himself, and then what does he get for that? He gets nothing. That you don't need these bad writers that Chuck was doing the hot take about earlier. These wrestlers, some of them are very talented. Some of them need writers. Some of them are very talented, but they're physical specimens and not quite mic specimens. I mean, I think Ricochet is the perfect example of that, because the most into Ricochet I've ever been was when he was on Lucha Underground as Prince Puma, and he didn't need to say a word. He just jumped around and was a really good wrestler. And sometimes you can get away with just being that.
Here's the problem. Wrestling isn't a sport, it's a business. It's quote unquote sports entertainment, but ultimately it's a business run by a businessman. And it doesn't matter how good we think something is. He's the owner. He's the person who runs the company. And it's his decision what he wants to do, because it's his business that is either going to make money or not make money. And you can't argue too much because he's been around. I mean, Vince has been able to keep WWE viable for a long time. But maybe not much longer. I don't know.
Well, but
seems like the business is going the opposite direction right now.
Well, it's something to say when you're keeping a business viable when you have no competition, and at the same time the indie scene is flourishing. All that tells me is that you haven't been doing a good product for a long time. And now the dream of wrestlers isn't necessarily to go to WWE anymore. It's just to make a good career out of it, have good matches. Doesn't matter where you go.
I honestly think the two places that wrestlers want to get to right now are NXT and AEW. And it's weird. I feel like NXT is not even part of WWE when we talk about it. Like, I talk about it like it's another entity out there, like it's another independent. And that's how they're running it, and it's working. The minute they don't run it like that, it'll just fold in, and it'll really be over, because then AEW and New Japan and everybody else can really just squash them, because the product is not good on the main card.
Is it a situation where when Triple H took creative control over NXT, that he probably had an agreement with Vince that was just like, really, just leave me alone, just like allow me to do whatever the heck I want.
Well, I think it was Vince didn't see NXT as a quote unquote threat. He probably just went, it's a bunch of smaller guys running around, having fun, doing taped vignettes and stuff. He just thought there was nothing there. It was his minor leagues. That's all it ever was. And he would pull up guys when he wanted them. Now, guys are happy to just stay there. Guys want to just stay there. I mean, Gargano's out there talking about how it's the best show of Raw, SmackDown, or NXT, which I agree with. But people don't want to go anywhere now. And that's a dangerous thing. Like, there could be a day where NXT eventually becomes the A show, like legitimately becomes the A show, and the other shows are just looked at as other shows, like, like the Sunday Night Heat used to be, or main event used to be. That's how much different it's gotten, to the point where NXT just dominates compared to, if you had to compare those three shows, has there ever been a point where you went, man, NXT wasn't as good as Raw this week? I don't think we've ever said that.
Does Vince McMahon need to go?
No. He's earned the right to just stick around until he legitimately just can't do it. I can't take that away from him. He was part of the Attitude Era. He was part of the 80s, building WWE, taking wrestling and taking it out of these little independents and regionalized areas and turning it into this giant conglomerate. You can't deny that if it wasn't for Vince McMahon, wrestling wouldn't be what it is today.
I agree.
100% agree with that.
But at the same time, I would say to all the people who think to themselves, no, he needs to be put to pasture, there's other good wrestling to watch. Go watch it.
Yeah, if anything, this is good for wrestling. Go watch NWA, go watch Ring of Honor, go watch, New Japan, go watch AEW, go watch local wrestling. I mean, go watch whatever you can right now. Go watch wrestling overseas. You know how much wrestling I'm getting into because I'm not interested in the main card that's in Europe right now, in Germany, in UK. Like, there's tons of independents over there that are really interesting, and I credit the fact that Raw and SmackDown have been boring. And I sat on this podcast and preached about 205 Live because I was tired with the main shows. I preached about NXT UK because I was over the main shows. It's the same thing. I've been starting to look at NWA Power more now because Jimmy told me at first I thought it was terrible. I watched it more and I'm like, you know what? It's different. It's interesting. And that's what's great about all the different wrestling out there right now. It's different. It's interesting. It's not the same old big guy beating up another big guy, two people in a corner in a headlock. It's something new.
And Jimmy, to answer your question that kind of started all this, it's on the decline. I don't think it's going to come back. And it doesn't matter what show or what promotion you're watching. And we talked about this maybe a month or two ago. It's nowhere near the amount of numbers that we're watching during the Attitude Era.
Do you remember any of those numbers off the top of your head? Some of the big ones?
Oh man, I mean, we're talking about like when Raw now gets, 2 million people. I mean, I remember at the tops Raw was getting at least 7 million, if I remember correctly.
It was like 5 to 7. Yeah, it was somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 million when they were going back and forth and having the Monday Night Wars.
And I wonder how much of that was pushing the envelope and people were complaining about it, but they were just like, okay, well, we're just going to do it anyway because it's entertainment. And people were not only watching to see and enjoy, but also to complain. Like, oh, I'm going to watch this and then complain about it.
What's going to happen to wrestling? Is wrestling going to go away one day?
Nah, I don't think so. I actually don't know that I agree with Chuck when he says it's going to continue to decline. I think that you have some promotions out there that they need to just make sure they don't get gun shy. Like I think AEW does a fairly good job of putting some crazy stuff on television sometimes, and I just want to make sure they don't get gun shy. Like, never stop putting crazy stuff on television. Push the limits every now and then. Doesn't mean you have to do it every week. But again, I think that's what gets people interested in it. When you give them something that they can't see anywhere else. But for all this, PC culture that we live in, and we're letting PC culture affect wrestling, yet people watch, shows like, the Housewives of Atlanta or something, where they're just crazy shows. Like, if you actually were to watch a show like that and break it down, like, that stuff's pretty bad, right? So, like, why can't wrestling do it? The most popular show, for a long time was Game of Thrones, and it was a pretty crazy show. Why can't wrestling do it? I mean,
I picture wrestling turning into that really funny South Park episode that mocks wrestling about like how they come out to the ring and they're like almost doing like Shakespeare. Like they were coming out and building characters, not actually wrestling at all. And Vince McMahon actually comes to watch it and thinks it's amazing. And that's to me the next direction wrestling has to go. It has to still have wrestling in it, but I think they really need to build these interesting characters and interesting stories and interesting plots to get to compete with entertainment, because we are a society that needs to be entertained, and it's just not as entertaining as it used to be because I think they've tried to be too real with it. It needs to get more crazy. Like Lucha Underground, I think they had the recipe, man. They just didn't have the right roster and they didn't quite have the right backing, but they had the recipe. Make this a true soap opera. Make this true ridiculousness, like unbelievableness. Like that's interesting. That's why The Undertaker was always great.
that's all Mil Muertes was. Mil Muertes was this
Mil Muertes, yeah.
unbelievable wrestler. Like,
That's
it's
the recipe, man.
impossible to believe in the character if you're really being like honest about it, but it doesn't matter. It's suspension of disbelief. Who cares? It's a fiction. We're enjoying a fiction. So, I don't know. But hey, let's stop dead there because there is a pay-per-view on Saturday, and it was important. We're doing this on a Thursday night because Big Baby Jimmy is going to be up at a wedding this weekend, and I wanted to make sure we got picks in before I went to that. So, Captain Chuckles, you got it?
Hey, what's the match lineups looking like for Revolution?
I also have to make sure we do the pick order, right?
I got it here. Hold on 1 second.
Was that Jim?
Do you actually have the pick order? Have we ever actually written that down? Who goes first? Who goes second? Who goes? We're always so
it's got
bad
written
with
down
that.
everywhere.
We keep saying that, but remember I used the juju on the last one, so I don't have the numbers.
I just want to point out that picks for today's show that we just did through the chat, the text chat. Yeah, I came in dead last.
They were all pretty close, though, quite frankly.
Yeah, but I'm rolling with two terrible picks in a row.
Well, if you went last, you should go first this time for coming in last today.
I'll go first. That's fine. This is AEW. Jimmy's winning this. This is Jimmy's moment to take down my brother.
Yeah,
Don't give him that much credit. Come on.
We'll do reverse of what the rankings were today. So, Chris, you'll go first. I will go second. Jimmy will go third. And Steven, since he had the most wins today, he'll go last.
I can't wait to not pick right. Looking forward to it.
Just think story, man. That's how I always pick it. Just think story.
Yeah. My story's not
Okay.
the same as their story. That's the problem.
So we'll start off with what'll probably be the kickoff match to this, which is, as far as I see, SoCal Uncensored versus the Dark Order.
All right. So hopefully we have a I don't know if it's a pre-show match. I hope they don't do anything with the Exalted one yet. Be nice if they held that for a little while. I'm gonna pick the Dark Order. They actually haven't won much. So it would actually be this is the actual Dark Order wrestling, right? Not like their two little henchmen guys that they threw into that battle royal. So
No, I think it's the actual Evo Uno and
Evil Uno and I forgot the other guy's name. But yeah, I'm gonna pick Dark Order.
okay. I am going to go with, oh man. I'm gonna go with SoCal. I think they'll take it this time. I think the Dark Order's time is coming, but it's gonna have to wait a little while longer till we get closer to see who this Exalted One is going to be.
I like the idea of starting to set up the curveball with this match. So the way that we do that is we have what seems to be a pretty standard SoCal Uncensored versus Dark Order, but again, Christopher Daniels is nowhere to be seen, and SoCal pretty much dominates the match for the most part. But at some point, maybe we get it shown on the screen that Christopher Daniels is like chained up somewhere or being held captive by the Dark Order, and that gets SoCal's concentration off the match a little bit, and then Dark Order is able to capitalize on it. So I'll go with the Dark Order.
Okay, so all it says of what I see is SoCal Uncensored, Frankie Kazarian, and Scorpio Sky with Christopher Daniels versus the Dark Order, Evil Uno, and Stu Grayson with Alex Reynolds and John Silver.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how they throw it out. But either way, I still would think that Christopher Daniels will cause them to lose the match. I think it just is kind of like a way of setting up to just make him seem guilty, so that when they actually reveal the right person, that everybody's ooh was never expecting that.
You know what? I was agreeing with Chuck until you just explained your thought process, and makes sense for them to try to make it seem like it's him and then swerving and not be. So I'm going with the Dark Order now. Thanks for changing my mind, Jimmy.
Welcome.
That's the benefit and bad part about going last.
Yep, you get your mind gets changed about 7 times. Okay, next match we're gonna hit is the Bastard Pac versus Mr. Freshly Squeezed Orange Cassidy.
Isn't interesting. I mean, they've been setting up this match for a while because they've had run-ins a couple times. But Pac coming off of a loss to me is tough to have him lose again to Orange Cassidy. I think Orange Cassidy plays the underdog in this. Obviously, he probably has a lot of great spots, but ultimately, I think Pac hits his finisher, and nobody kicks out of that unless the ref screws up. So Pac's going to win and beat Orange Cassidy, but it's going to be a really good match, I think.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Orange Cassidy actually, really wrestle with AEW. Having said that, as excited as I am to see that, yeah, I do see Pac taking this match. But the two of them having this kind of ongoing feud here for a little while. So Pac is my choice.
Well, for me, Pac was the inevitable person to face off with Jon Moxley with the storylines, the way that they're going. So I view Pac Cassidy, even though it was supposed to be Pac Omega originally, they decided to push one of the storylines forward So I view this as just a stall match, and it's more of like an entertainment match. I mean, they've built up a little bit of story to it, but I don't think that story matters too much. It's more going to be like an entertainment match from people finally getting to see Orange Cassidy wrestle, which is pretty fun. You know, he does kind of like this, I'm slow, I'm slow, I'm slow, and then he'll suddenly do this really quick move that you're not expecting to see, and he'll make it entertaining. But yeah, I agree with Chris. Pac's not going to lose because I believe that he's going to be the heir to the AEW throne, and he'll be the next person to go after it once Moxley wins it. Spoiler alert.
I agree. It's going to be very entertaining. I think Cassidy gets a lot of great spots in this match, but I think the bastard ends up pulling it off in the end, but not because he's going to be the next one on the throne. I have some other ideas for that we'll get into with some of our other picks, and I will lay it out nicely later.
Okay, we have some mystery laid down by Steven here. Next up, we have the AEW Women's World Championship. The champion, Nyla Rose, versus the challenger, Chris Statlander.
They'd be silly to flip it this quickly. Nyla Rose wins.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. It would be stupid to, you know, have her go through the whole thing with Riho, you know, and the suspension and all that kind of stuff and all the other things that happened, and then her winning just to take it off a month or so after it happened. So yeah, Nyla Rose retains.
I agree with you guys. Nyla Rose retains. There's too much story built up with her having no friends in the back, so it's important that she one by one starts picking people apart and going through the whole roster so that it can set up for, you know, a good versus evil storyline later on.
You see, I don't agree. I kind of like the idea of Statlander taking it from her and giving her that mean monster edge. I hate to say this, but beat her with the roll up of doom, you know? Something that you wouldn't expect to take her out so easy. And then it just like flips that switch and she just runs rampant over everybody, destroying everybody to get her belt.
Okay. He stands alone. Next up, we will hit up Darby Allin versus Sammy Guevara.
So another really good match on paper. Guevara got the one up on Darby this week, but if you go back and look at a lot of Sammy's matches, Sammy loses a lot of big matches. And I think Darby needs this win more than Sammy does. Sammy's obviously a heel. He's in the inner circle. He could easily take this pin and have a great match and still look strong. So I think you let Darby Allin win this match and pin Sammy. And it'll be probably, like I said, one of the crazier, better matches of the night.
Yeah, definitely a good match. Probably, you know, it's a good card, really. I mean, if you think about it. I think Sammy's going to get the win. I think they're going to have this kind of get drawn out for a little while longer. And I have a feeling they're going to do some kind of crazy match between the two of them with some sort of stipulation or whatever coming down the pike. So I'm going with the Inner Circle and Sammy winning this one.
You know, I think I agree with you, Chuck. I think that because this match does not have a stipulation, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Darby Allin to win it. Not only that, I'm also looking at it from the standpoint of, if I believe that Jericho is going to lose his belt, then do I really think that all of the Inner Circle is going to look weak at the same time, or do they need to have some semblance of strength as they're moving through AEW with what will probably be without Jericho for a while because he's likely to be touring with his band. So I think that Sammy Guevara will win because I think the Inner Circle needs a strong showing.
I agree with Chuck and Jimmy, honestly, 100%. I think they end up doing something, and at the end of the night, when Jericho does lose, he walks in and Sammy's celebrating his win with a little bit of the bubbly, and Jericho gets pissed and kind of disappears to reemerge later after his little tour's done.
Steven sounded a little bit out of breath right there, you know?
It's a tough pick.
It was a tough
I just,
one.
These are
I
tough
feel
picks.
really bad. I feel really bad siding with both of you.
These are very difficult picks. Picking AEW is not easy.
It's not. It's not. Well, when you have writers that are halfway good, you know, you actually have to think about it, and it takes a little bit out of you, you know. We're gonna go to Hager and Rhodes. Tiro.
I can't see Jake Hager having his first match and losing. It just doesn't make sense. They're trying to make him look like a monster, and they've done a pretty good job of it, except for the last few weeks when Dustin comes out and keeps knocking him over the top rope. But I think they can salvage that by Hager having a really strong showing this weekend. So I'm going to pick Hager.
Man, it's so tough. It's like I totally agree with you. You don't want to have his legitimate like first actual step into the ring match with AEW go south on him. But on the other hand, I'm like, man, but I really like in my heart of hearts, I really want Dustin to just kind of kick his ass. I'm
That's
torn on
that's
this
that
one.
little kid in you actually picking the
It
the
is.
fan portion and not
yeah.
the
It's wrestling
logical
working.
portion.
It's wrestling working.
Yeah. Oh man, but with what I think my last two picks are going to be in the bigger matches, I am going to go with Hager winning this. And yeah, Chris, you're I think you're spot on. You can't have Superman come into it and lose when he's in his first movie. You just can't have it. So Jake Hager.
Yeah, and I would again. My last point is that the Inner Circle needs to look strong. They need to look strong, and so the easiest way to do that is you set up this lovable Dustin Rhodes, feed him to the wolves, have Jake Hager kick the crap out of him.
I think it starts a little slow. When Hager's coming out, Dustin's already out there and attacks him before he's ready, gets the upper hand. Probably 2 or 3 minutes of beating down on him, and then Hager takes over and just wipes the floor with him, beats him up pretty badly, leaves no doubt, and then goes off to the back to make the Inner Circle continue looking strong throughout the night.
On to our second championship of the night. We will have the tag team championship champions of Kenny Omega and Adam Page versus the Jackson Boys and the Young Bucks.
See, to me, this might be the hardest pick for me of the night because I can write this story either way and make it make sense either way. And they have done a really good job. And Jimmy brought this up. Adam Hangman Page all of a sudden is a legitimate person, a legitimate character, a legitimate threat in AEW. When they tried to build him up the first time, it just didn't work. And this time, the way they've built him up with Omega going up against the Elite, it's been excellent. Even the promo that they just cut on him, talking about him being a jobber in Ring of Honor, was hilarious. That being said, I think Revolution's a big match for them. I think the Young Bucks have been destined to obviously win the championship. But I think there's a way to continue this Hangman and Kenny Omega win streak and continue this storyline to eventually have Hangman versus Kenny Omega without them dropping the belts right now. So I'm going to let them retain and say that they beat the Young Bucks. And maybe it's a little bit dirty. Maybe they don't do it cleanly. And maybe that's the beginning of Omega and Hangman not agreeing.
God. Oh.
I'm
Man,
bubbling.
the very end of that was just like, oh man, I wasn't thinking of it that way. That's a great way of doing it.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
going to be wrong. Don't worry.
No, you're not. I don't know. We talked about this last week on the podcast. I think I brought it up of, who's going to lose the belts, who's going to break it up, is it what's going on next, is it going to be Omega and Page versus each other, is it going to be is it going to be Omega kind of dropping out of the Elite, where is this storyline going to go? Just like you said, Chris, I mean, this one is, out of all of them, I agree with you, this is the hardest one to pick. And man, I don't even know. It's so hard just to be different. I'm going to go Young Bucks. I'm going to say, they get their due from not having the titles at all so far in AEW. They get it. Something's going to happen between Omega and Page, and someone is not going to be happy. So I'm going to go Young Bucks.
Yeah, so it's like you're in this situation where you're asking yourself, is it Hangman Page that's going to do something dirty to get the win over the Young Bucks, or is it the Young Bucks that are going to do something not even quite dirty, but maybe what Page would take exception to get the win? And then Page takes exception to that and then attacks them after the match is over. And then, it starts to build from there. Either way, I feel like Omega Page is going to be at the next pay-per-view. So it's just, how do we going to get there? And I'm going to... Man, I think after the interview that they had, I'm going to side with Chuck. And I'm going to think that the thing that is not quite a dastardly deed, but Page is going to take exception to it, happens. The Bucks do it to him and get the win over him, and then that flips him over the edge. Maybe not even that night, but like maybe the next day or something like that.
They did have a little bit, the Young Bucks, I mean, did have a little bit of like an attitude-ish, in that little interview there, so yeah, I think you're right, Jimmy. Steven?
I think they're both viable stories, and I think we win either way, by the way, because I think it's a really good storyline they put together. And I like them putting all of them together specifically so that they're not necessarily hogging up all of the spotlight, but they're hogging up their own little space of it.
Speaking of hogging up, you just hogged up the last few minutes of me talking. I think the Young Bucks win it, and I think they take advantage of Omega not being 100%. And then afterwards, Hangman loses it and starts attacking and beating them down. And Kenny goes to help his friends, and that's what starts the big breakdown of Hangman Page and Kenny Omega.
Okay. MJF versus Cody. It has finally come to the climax. All of the things that Cody has had to go through has all happened. Chris, who do you got?
I mean, if we've gone this whole way for Cody to just lose in this match, what was this all for, right? Like, it's hard to pick against Cody after all he's had to go through. But being that would be a really great way to get MJF even more heat than he already has, I have to consider it. I'm not gonna I'm I'm not gonna go that way. I'm gonna say Cody gets the win because I'm actually thinking things are a little bit different than you guys do. So I'm gonna pick Cody in this match. I think I know one of the things that's gonna come out of these picks, but from you guys at least. But I'm gonna go with Cody. I'm gonna say that he's built this up. He's gone through everything. Lashes in the back, cage matches, broken his toe doing a moonsault on top of a cage. Everything he's done was to beat MJF, and he's going to do it. I'm picking Cody.
Cody has climbed the mountain. He's been through the trials and tribulations that is MJF and everything that he has put him through. And on this night, Cody will get the win. And Cody will get the win by giving MJF a little of what MJF gave to Cody. And there will be a very, very hard crotch shot that humbles MJF to the ground. And Cody gets the pin and wins.
I think that the most wonderful thing about Cody is, and the thing that I had mentioned made him the most important wrestler, was that he realizes how important story is and how it doesn't matter whether you win or you lose. It just matters whether you've told a good story. And the best way of telling this story is that Cody has fought his way to the mountaintop and he's going to lose because he's Tommy Dreamer. Cody's not supposed to win when it counts. For him to be solo, he's not going to win when it really, really counts. And I could be dead wrong on that, and I can easily see a way where I am, but I think it's so much more compelling to have Cody lose, to get really, really close, but then to lose. And I'm not saying he doesn't have to lose clean, but I think it makes way more sense for Cody to lose if you're trying to build the absolute best story you can. And those two continuing on a program with each other will still, be, I mean, this is the first match that they're going to have. It's the very first match. So this could go a lot longer. So I'm picking MJF.
I'm picking MJF, and this is part of what I was saying earlier. You were talking about the bastard being the next for the throne, and I think you're wrong. I think MJF is the one who takes the belt from Moxley after Moxley wins later. Spoilers on that. I think Cody's set up to win, and Anderson turns on him and sides with MJF, and they start their own four horsemen-esque kind of a group, with MJF being like the Ric Flair character with all the charisma to take the belt, and he builds his team around him. They play dirty, they play to win, and they enjoy it, and I think it's going to be a great run, setting up for a few months down the road a payoff match between Cody and MJF where Cody finally wins the belt from MJF, but that'll be months away, and we can have some great storytelling in the middle.
That's a great storyline.
Yeah, a split. And I could totally see it going the way that you described it, Jimmy. Could totally see it. I just hope Cody gets it in this one. Okay, last match of the night for the AEW World Championship. The champion and Fozzy leader, Chris Jericho, versus Jon Moxley.
So I let Cody win because I think Jericho's going to retain. I think this whole thing where Jericho's going on tour is happening. He's obviously going on tour, but he's also wrestling for AEW, where you only have to wrestle once a week. And Jericho's got a private jet if he needs it. And Jericho can show up every Wednesday and be there and do what he has to do, wrestle sometimes, cut promos sometimes. I think Jericho can retain, hold on to the title. Moxley obviously has been fighting to win the title, but they could quickly build a mid card or something so that Moxley can move into more of a hardcore attraction. Maybe Jericho wins with some kind of interference. Maybe you bring in a Harper finally. I don't know if his time's come up yet or not, but no matter what angle it's going to be, I think Jericho retains. And because I think Cody ultimately needs to be the first one to take it off of Jericho, since Cody is the one that built this empire of AEW and Jericho is trying to take credit for it.
Well, last week I brought up the whole Jericho going on tour thing and said that Jericho's going to drop the belt to Moxley. After thinking about it, I was out of breath, just like Steven was. And I disagree with myself from last week. And I agree with the way Christopher just described it. And I'm agreeing and going with Jericho. And he will retain. He will make it to at least 2 of the Wednesday AEWs, but we'll do mostly either taped tape stuff when he's there. But Jericho retains, and Moxley is sent to the corner with no dessert.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see a world after the last pay-per-view in particular. I don't see a world where you would have both Moxley and Cody win or both MJF and Jericho win. I think it's got to be one and the other, a heel and a face. And I really do believe that Cody MJF is going to be the last match of the night, and that's going to be the shocker. That's going to be the, MJF winning match. And I just think that Moxley's just going to beat Jericho. I mean, I think that's the easy storyline. I don't think it's, a better or worse storyline, but I think it works. It's just a storyline that works. So I'm going with Moxley.
And I agree with you again, Jimmy. Moxley all day. It's not that Jericho can't do there. Jericho, even being on tour, he might still do some little backstage taped segments. But one, I don't think he needs the belt at all. I mean, it's Chris freaking Jericho. And two, I think you give it to Moxley to start throwing different, angles at things. And it takes it away from the inner circle versus the elite, to where if you let Cody against Jericho again, it's just the inner circle versus the elite again, which they've already done and played out. Let it be Moxley's turn with the belt and move forward.
Well, that's it. That's the pay-per-view.
I wonder.
Those are our matches.
I wonder
Should
what
be a good one.
Nick and Kramer will pick for that pay-per-view. We'll have to send out a text message and make sure they give us their picks soon. See if Nick picks all my picks again. He did that today.
Copy, paste.
I know, right? He just moved a couple names around thinking I wouldn't notice.
It was pretty funny.
I'm reading it. I'm like, wait a second. Aren't these my picks? Yeah, I mean, I look forward to the pay-per-view. Sadly, I will be at a wedding while this pay-per-view is going on, so I do not get to watch it live, but I will be purchasing it and watching it. I just won't be watching it live. I still got my mad support for AEW. AEW.
I'll watch it live for you. How
There you
about
go. I'm sure. I figured you would.
that?
I figured you'd jump.
I'm looking forward to it,
I figured
man.
you'd jump all over it when I told you I was gonna buy it.
It should be a good pay-per-view. It's I mean, it's stacked. I mean, look at it. All the names we just rattled through. There's no real bad match on there. I mean, the Nyla Rose Statlander match, no offense to them, but it's probably the worst looking match on paper of all the matches there. And not all of them I'm saying are good because of wrestling. You know, Jericho Moxley is going to be good because of storytelling. Hangman, Omega, and the Young Bucks are probably going to have great spots. Cody, MJF, probably a little bit of both. Great spots, great storytelling. Nyla Rose and Statlander, if they do a good job storytelling, it'll be a good match. Dustin Rhodes and Hager, two older guys, but they're going to tell a good story. Our Darby Allin and Guevara might kill each other. Like, they're going to do some crazy stuff. Same with Pac and Orange Cassidy. And it's always entertaining to see SoCal Uncensored and Dark Order. I mean, they're both fun tag teams that have decent spots back and forth. So there's nothing bad about this pay-per-view. It's going to be a good one. It's going to rival, I think, some of these NXT takeovers we've seen. So I'm looking forward to it.
And anything is going to be better than Super Showdown.
We're just not going to speak of that. Like, I think we did that for the last one. We just decided to it happened. They had like terrible matches or botch city or whatever. Like, we just need to move past these Saudi Arabia stuff and just ignore that they ever happened. Because we never, if they never happened, let's remove Super Showdown completely out of our memory and just start tomorrow with Goldberg is the champion, the Fiend is not. Let's not even pretend to know why that happened or how that happened. Let's just be happy that the Fiend is not the champion, and now he could go stalk the crap out of anyone he wants to. So I'm good with that.
Let's also hope that all the wrestlers actually get out of Saudi Arabia again and not get stuck like they did last time.
They're already on their way back. The funny thing is, people are already
Woohoo.
sending out that the plane has taken off and is on its way. You know, he could track planes. Like, that was the big story. Like, here you go. People are already tracking the airplanes.
Love it. I love it.
Well, boys, thank you for manipulating your schedules and being able to do this tonight, since I wasn't going to be available the rest of the weekend. I appreciate it. Maybe before we go, one more hot take for the road.
I'm gonna forego a hot take, and I'm gonna give a shout out to one of our probably one of our best listeners, Chaz. Thanks for listening, man. Thanks for chatting with me on Twitter. He's always got some interesting things to talk about, old school wrestling and today's wrestling. So shout out for being a good listener and interacting with us on Twitter. That's my hot take.
Man, gonna do the shout out?
We have very few people that love to interact with us, and I want to give credit to where credit is due.
Truth. Yeah.
Our truth.
Our truth. Yes. The ultimate joke.
By the way, go watch Our Truth special on WWE Network. I can't because I stopped my subscription, but you can.
Yeah, WWE. He stopped his subscription, and it was because he foresaw what was going to happen at Super Showdown. That's why he stopped it. That might not even be true, but I'm speaking for him anyway.
Truth.
Steven, you want a hot take?
I don't know if it's be a hot take or not, but I've been thinking maybe this whole Goldberg winning is a swerve to take it off the Fiend and repurpose it. Maybe it's not going to be Roman Reigns. What if we end up with Goldberg versus Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania and Bray wins it, not the Fiend?
I mean, I don't know. I don't like that, but it could be.
I like it better than Goldberg versus Roman Reigns again. Anybody versus Roman Reigns. I'm over Roman Reigns being in the main event.
Glad that hopefully Baron Corbin Roman Reigns is over. Chuckles, you got a hot take?
Well, I've had about 10 hot takes the last 2 weeks. And I don't know. You know, I actually didn't write anything down this week that kind of made me mad, except for the whole Goldberg fiasco. But my hot take, I guess, the Fiend will flourish now that he does not have the belt, in my opinion. And hopefully the WWE writing staff does finally do the right thing with Bray Wyatt and the Fiend.
I guess my personal hot take would be not even a hot take, more like an advertisement. Everybody go watch NWA Power and have a really fun time watching wrestling.
Truth.
And that's been our time, people. We appreciate you listening to us. Sorry it was such a somber day here at the Bald Monkeys Wrestling Podcast. Too often that we allow wrestling to get to our emotions, and it did that today. It hurt real bad, but we're getting through it together. We're getting through it with you guys listening, and yeah, you 2 or 3 people, or whoever. I mean, you might be listening and we don't know, but speak up, yell at us, yell at me that you're listening to me, or that you're listening to Chris, or that you're listening to Chuck, or that you're listening to Steven. And then now I'm doing that thing that Steven likes so much, that I just ramble on and I just won't shut up and just end the podcast. But this is my favorite part of the podcast.
Ramble on, man. Ramble on.
Just stumbling along. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. And by the way, next week, 1 year anniversary.
Woo!
Woo!
Happy birthday to us.
Happy birthday to us. Well, no, we don't need to worry about that. That's next week. All right,
Next
later.
week. We'll sing next week. Better.